All right, so we're going to talk about Prelude and Fugue number 6. With this piece, I would encourage my student to first and foremost play the piece blocked. This gives us an opportunity to analyze the piece together and for the student to realize how the piece progresses harmonically and how it's not a really piece about playing all these triplets, which you do have, but it's just Bach's way of making chords sound more interesting, but it's still just chord progressions. I get them to see that it's really just a chord progression. By playing it blocked, it helps them see that. So we'd start at the beginning. Here we go. 1, D minor, 4 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord, still 1 chord, and then 4, 7. Here's our third, 3, 4. key. And I give this is a teaching exam or teaching opportunity to ask the students what happens here between these chord progressions. Here we are, and what key is that? Where are we now? We were in D minor before, so why this now? So that gives them opportunity to it's in my relative key, and that makes sense. That's typical for a Baroque piece to go from the minor to the relative major. I'd make sure and I would encourage the student to actually write in these Roman numerals, write in their analysis on this first section, and then encourage them to go home and try analyzing the rest by themselves. The next section, of course, travels through many keys, and that's how Bach kind of builds climaxes and tension to a piece. And we talk about that, how he builds tension, how this goes, and then from F major, now it changes. And now we're in G minor here. And then I'd also point out, look for those accidentals in the music, and then to see they're clues for you. They're clues for you that you're leading somewhere. Oftentimes when Bach writes in those sharps, it's that T-Do relationship that we like to hear so much. So it's often giving you a clue to what key he's modulating to. We talk about that. Next, I would talk about textures at the piano and the sound quality that we want. And a good way to teach that would be talking about the instrumentation of the piece. How would this probably be, if you could make an instrument to this, if you could add instruments to it, what instruments would they be? Like this bass line here. What would be plucking that, or what would be playing that in their mind? And then also, what would this other hand, your right hand, be playing? Which instrument would this be? Give them an opportunity. This kind of sounds like that cello playing. And how can I make it? How do I touch the keyboard to make it sound like that cello that I want it to be? And then this sounds more like maybe the violin. And I would also talk to them about, how to get the touch that they want. Detached sign of a detached sort of cello touch. How we get that with our hands, either by showing them, or if they're kinesthetic, by having them feel my hands, how it feels at the piano. And I would also talk about what's happening with our right hand here. Like, it's very notey, so what notes should we really focus on? What do we actually want to emphasize? We want the notes to be even, but we also want specific notes to be brought out, because this violin line, also there's a melody there. I point that out, how, oftentimes the beginning or end of those triplets are they're a melody line. So we want to try to bring out those the pinky and not so much the thumb and the pointer finger, because that's not really where our melody line is, but it's in those the upper register there. How do we bring those out? How can we bring those out more by in going through it slow with the student? I make sure before the student leaves that we have a good feel of what is happening, the organization of the piece. I'd also just look for things that stand out to me, like at the end, how there's that chromatically descending line. That's very, very interesting. And yet he ends on of course he goes on and ends on the Picardy third. So pointing things out like that, or some of the sequencing that goes on in the left hand and the right hand. I would find opportunities like that to guide them with this piece. And so for the fugue, this one is has quite a bit of dissonance and complexity. So I think what I would start off with is I would ask the student to really listen to a recording and really try to pinpoint in the recording what are the voices, what are the players of the fugue, and where do you find them. So I for the first lesson, I'd probably send them home, listen to a recording, and have them analyze where the voices are coming in. Hopefully they can see, here's that theme that keeps coming back in the fugue. I'm gonna do it again. So we have that is the theme or the motto in the soprano or the alto, and then we hear the theme again. I would hope they'd also see the theme in the tenor. And then the theme in the bass. And then lastly, the theme in the soprano comes in kind of on top of that, at the end of the bass line. And interestingly enough, the soprano, I talk about how the soprano begins, the soprano, when it enters the soprano, never really gets to finish. It starts the sequencing and traveling that we hear so common in Bach's music, which is interesting. The soprano voice entrance is the beginning of something new. I'd also try to get the student to see, after trying to find the four voice entrances at the beginning, I'd also ask them to look at the piece, trying to find the voices, where they come in different sections now during the development of the fugue. So finding times when that comes back again, like measure 12 there, when we hear a little bit of that theme come back. clues that Bach has to show us where that's coming back, like that lowered third interval, the staccato to the trill. Is a good indicator that that's probably that theme, like in measure 19. Once again, you hear the staccato to the trill. So looking for those little clues can help us figure out where, you know, the theme is coming back. I also get them to look for the sequencing and patterns in the piece to help them learn this piece. Sequencing happens a lot in the traveling of the fugues and Bach in general. So I try to get the student to see. Sorry about that. So I would get the student to try to look for sequencing that happens in the piece as a way to simplify and see those clues of traveling in Bach. So for example, in measure 17, how he has the sequence. Also, again, that sequence happens again at measure 24. And then again, sequencing. And more sequencing in measure 30. So looking for those sequencing again, it happens quite a few times. That same little figure can help them, and getting that gesture down of those little, I almost feel like small circles coming down can help them get a better handle on this piece, and also really understanding that voice. Even that, I would even think that sequencing, that it comes from that, it's almost just an elaboration on the theme. Because he has those descending 32nd notes there, which is interesting. So getting the student to find these little clues in the fugue can help them learn this.